One of the pitfalls that I see happening in the church quite regularly is that people are taking being serious about God to mean getting involved in doctrine, getting stirred up about doctrine. And I know doctrine is important. I know everyone's going to come at me and say how important doctrine is. But the thing is that this can hinder people from really following the Holy Spirit, from really studying the Word for themselves. And instead of really seeking God, purely God, just God, and listening to God, they instead study books about God. They study theology about God, and they end up serving these things about God rather than seeking God himself. And the difficulty with this is that so many people are trying to be serious about God, and what they are taught to do and what they instinctively think to do is, instead of following what God has been teaching us from the beginning to do, which is read the Word seriously and slowly and intentionally, to listen to the Holy Spirit, to be led by the Holy Spirit, to devote yourself to prayer, to grow in the disciplines of godliness and a righteous heart, those types of things. We instead get caught up in the logic and the theories and the theology about things, and we can be so pulled away from really seeking God purely for himself by these things that are ultimately coming from man. What is happening today is that the church is like, oh, the church is so messed up. Oh, things are so wrong. And what they're doing is, instead of being like, we need to get back to this purity of just God, we interpret being serious about God and having right teaching as going right towards the theology of man, getting caught up in the systems of theology of man. And what this is doing is it's becoming this way of convincing people more of these systems, when a lot of the problems we have in the church is because of these systems, and we continue to serve these systems rather than coming into a spiritual knowledge of God, rather than really seeking to come into an understanding of like the mysteries of faith, and what is God saying about sin, what is he saying about righteousness, and why does God say it like this, and wrestling with God and praying and seeking God. We instead are so caught up in these other things and so out of touch with how lacking our lives are of that spiritual knowledge, of that depth of faith. We need to be taught by God. We need to be taught purely by God. And so many people think that this is a scary thing. Oh, they believe in man. They believe in man more than in God. They are so afraid of really allowing people to be taught by God and expecting people to be taught by God, because they're gonna fly off the rails and they're gonna invent all these things and heresy. Let them. If people are going to corrupt themselves, if they are going to go and try and make heresies, then they can do that just as much in these systems of theology. It's what is a person's intention in their heart, and you can't control that. You definitely can't control that with your systems of theology. And it's hindering people who don't have that intention. It's hindering people who are trying to see God for themselves and making them feel like they are guilty of wanting those things when they are wanting to seek God for themselves, and they are needing a greater understanding of God. They're needing a greater depth of God in their lives. The weakness in the church today is that people are not taught by God. They are not being taught by the Holy Spirit. They are not being taught purely by the Word. And we keep looking around and seeing this immaturity and this inability, and we keep being, why is this happening? And the problem is that when people see that this is happening, they go deeper into man-made theology. They go deeper into, let's pick up another book on what people say about God, rather than only going towards what is cultivating, really learning from God himself and pushing ourselves to these things. And the problem that accompanies this is like we do this because we feel that it's easier to read a book about theology than to pray. We feel that it's easier, to listen to other people tell us about God than seek God for ourselves. But this is the difference between whether we really have a knowledge of God, a depth of understanding of God himself, or we don't. And if we don't have that deep faith and that deep conviction and that deep knowledge of God, then we can't properly go into this world and teach others about God. God has taught us that we need to learn God from the Holy Spirit. We need to learn God from the scriptures. And yes, we absolutely have people that come in and teach the word, but not in a way that is supposed to take the spot of God. That's, the teaching of man, taking the spot of the lordship of Christ in our lives. The teaching of man is supposed to be encouraging us and cultivating us towards knowing God on our own and coming into an understanding of what is spiritually true. And instead, we drive people towards man-made doctrine. We drive people towards our systems and our ideas. And we are so blind to how much damage this is causing in the church.